Flying has come a long way since the Wright brothers tested their first ever plane in the early 1900s, but as commercial aircraft have become more advanced and mainstream, our fuel consumption has also increased vastly, increasing our carbon emissions and having a knock-on effect in driving climate change. Commercial aviation drives climate change through the emission of CO2 when jet fuel is burned to create thrust for planes. Other greenhouse gases such as nitrogen oxides and water vapor have a similar heating effect in the atmosphere as CO2. Now, aviation only makes up 2.5% of CO2 emissions today, but it is a significant concern since the aviation industry is growing massively despite COVID, and CO2 emissions are set to triple by 2050, according to the International Civil Aviation Organization. Furthermore, because aircraft fly at higher altitudes, the warming effect of CO2 emitted at those high altitudes is estimated to be 2 to 4 times greater than the effect of those emissions at ground level. In recent years, there has been tremendous pressure on the aviation industry to go green, particularly in protests carried out at Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport, along with similar protests being carried out at Stockholm's Bromma Airport, London's Luton Airport, and at Milan. There are airports that say CO2 has a more phenomenal impact when emitted at higher altitudes, since it can mix with other chemicals more the higher up the plane is in the atmosphere. Some alternatives that the aviation industry have looked to are using SAFs, which are sustainable aviation fuels, and fuels based on hydrogen. But are they commercially viable? The idea of using sustainable aviation fuel has been around for quite some time now. First conceptualized in 2008, it has gone on to power 250,000 flights around the world. SAF is a type of aviation fuel made from renewable resources such as plant-based livestock, waste cooking oil, and other sources. It can be mixed with conventional jet fuel to reduce emissions by up to 50%, than a plane entirely using jet fuel. Unfortunately, SAFs are more expensive than conventional jet fuel at the moment, which means airlines and private jet owners have less of an incentive to use it, and procuring raw materials to make SAFs has become challenging since it requires a massive investment in capital and infrastructure, which makes it seem less profitable for companies willing to go into it. There are some airports which are already implementing the use of SAFs in everyday commercial aviation. Stockholm's Arlanda Airport is a prime example of this. In a statement from a representative of Swedavia, the organization that runs the airport, they were committed to having all domestic flights fossil fuel free by 2030 and most international flights fossil fuel free by 2050 by using incentives to make the purchase and mainstream use of SAFs more common by covering 50% of the additional cost of buying SAFs and giving passengers the option to cover the expenses of their flight by purchasing SAFs. SAFs are great in everything, but they are only one option. One of the other options is using hydrogen to fuel planes. Hydrogen has the potential to reduce and even completely eliminate all direct CO2 emissions caused by aviation. It is a clean burning fuel, producing only water vapor and heat on combustion, not producing harmful greenhouse gases like fossil fuels do. However, there are many significant hurdles to be crossed before hydrogen can become mainstream. One of the main challenges is the storage and transportation of hydrogen, which is currently more difficult and expensive to do than traditional fuels like gasoline and jet fuel. Hydrogen as a gas does not provide as much energy as liquid hydrogen does, and while there may be no CO2 emissions coming from hydrogen, because hydrogen burns at temperatures 10 times normal jet fuel does, it produces more nitrous oxide, which is another greenhouse gas and can trap heat in the atmosphere. Engineers and scientists are already working on mitigating the effects of hydrogen burning hotter, storage problems, and any other problems that may arise. Despite all of the challenges faced, there are already ongoing efforts to develop and implement hydrogen-powered planes in commercial aviation. Airbus has committed to developing 3 hydrogen-powered planes by 2035, with the goal of having a zero-emission aircraft in service by 2035 to 2040. Meanwhile, Rolls-Royce is testing the first ever hydrogen engine and will move to short and mid-range flight testing by the early 2030s. In conclusion, while transitioning to sustainable aviation fuels and hydrogen-powered planes in aviation faces challenges, they are both commercially viable alternatives to traditional jet fuel. SAFs are already being used in some airports, and incentives with commitments from airports like Stockholm's Arlanda Airport are encouraging the industry to make the switch. Meanwhile, Airbus and Rolls-Royce are working on developing hydrogen-powered planes with the goal of having zero-emission aircraft in service by 2035 to 2040. Despite the challenges, the commitment to green aviation technologies and alternative fuels provides hope for a more sustainable future in aviation. As Amelia Earhart once said, "The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity. The fears are paper tigers, and you can do anything you decide to do." Let us take action and work together towards a greener future in aviation.